and welcome back to the Neurodiverging podcast. My name is Danielle Sullivan, and I am your host and the founder over at Neurodiverging Coaching, which is a sliding scale practice that serves neurodivergent clients all around the world. You can learn more about us at neurodiverging.com. Today, I have a wonderful interview for you with Diana Renn, who is the author of a bunch of novels and has a new middle grade eco mystery coming out this month in just a couple of days, actually, by the time this goes up, called The Owl Prowl Mystery. It's coming out from Fitzroy Books or Regal House. My kids and I really liked it. Diana is the author of 5 novels, including these middle grade mysteries and also some creative nonfiction as well. Her essays have appeared in Publishers Weekly, The Huffington Post, Mindful, Writer's Digest, Flyaway Journal of Writing and Environment, and a lot of other places. She was awarded a Massachusetts Cultural Council grant for a collection of essays she's writing about becoming a neighborhood naturalist. And her previous book in the series we're going to be discussing today, Trouble at Turtle Pond, was named a 2023 Green Earth Book Award honor book by the Nature Generation. Diana also works as a freelance editor and a book coach and serves as a mentor in Creature Conserve, an organization that connects artists and scientists who work on conservation issues. Prior to this, she was a classroom teacher for many, many years. Diana's most recent book series, which we'll be talking about today, features a young man protagonist who is ADHD identified, and some of his classmates who have additional signs of or traits of neurodivergence. And the book is really about living as a neurodivergent young adult in society, and also focuses a lot on the themes of how being in nature intersect with neurodivergence. Diana and I have a really good conversation. I hope you'll enjoy it. Before we get to it, I do just want to thank my patrons over at patreon.com/neurodiverging who help make this work possible. If you're interested in learning more about our perks and also where your money goes, if you join, you can check us out at patreon.com/neurodiverging. We would love to see you there. Here's my interview with Diana. Okay. So welcome to the podcast, Diana. I'm so glad you're here today. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. My pleasure. I'm so happy to be here.
So you're the author of this new book, and I wondered if you could do us the honors of telling us about it.
So The Owl Prowl Mystery is my new book, and it's actually book 2 in a series, but I believe you can read them out of sequence or as standalones. So I'm actually going to summarize the first book really quickly, and then I'll do the second, if that's okay.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so Trouble at Turtle Pond was the first book in what I envision as a 4-book series about the Backyard Rangers. The Backyard Rangers are a group of self-appointed young wildlife rangers that fight crime and solve ecological mysteries in their town of Marsh Hollow, Massachusetts, which is fictitious. Trouble at Turtle Pond focuses on Miles, who has just moved to Marsh Hollow from the city, and he had some trouble at his old school. He's really looking forward to a fresh start. He's kind of bewildered because this is a really different neighborhood. It's near a wildlife refuge. There's wildlife in the streets. There's turtles crossing roads that are looking for places to make their nests. It's late spring, early summer. And, this is a totally different place. And of course, there's kids as well. And he has to figure out what is his place. How is he going to make a good first impression? He's haunted by his dad's advice that you only get one chance to make a first impression. It's a lot of pressure. So he encounters these turtles and is really fascinated. He is an animal lover. And as I mentioned, he had troubles at his old schools that might have been related to his ADHD and people not quite getting him. Might have been other factors, not important, fresh start, right? So he learns from a girl named Pia, who is watching out for these turtles and helping a local biologist. She's fostering a couple of hatchlings. So she lets him know there's been some trouble at the pond. There's a suspicion that someone is taking hatchlings, taking nesting turtles, taking radio trackers that are glued onto shells, messing up data. And so Miles thinks, wow, this is my chance to do something great and get a good reputation. And so he connects with Pia, they form the Backyard Rangers, other kids gradually get involved. And I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but there is some success in a roundabout way, and they're able to track down people that are stealing turtles for various reasons. So Book 2, The Owl Prowl Mystery, moves us from summer into fall, and Miles is now getting settled in his new school. And he's enjoyed some celebrity about the success with the turtle situation. But now people are kind of moving on, right? So what's next? How do you keep up that good reputation and navigate this really new situation? He's figured out the neighborhood, Turtle Pond Road. He's good with that. But this is school. This is fifth grade. And a whole different social scene, all different kids, some not so nice to him. So there's that. And then there are bird watchers flocking to the wildlife refuge, which he lives nearby because it's migration season. And there is a celebrity owl they've named Bella, who is acting in unusual ways that she seems very tame and friendly. And she's very visible during the day. So people are coming to get a glimpse of her, photograph her. And not all of these are great birders. There's some ethical problems involved, and the birds and the owls in particular are at risk. And so it's up to the rangers now to get behind this new mystery and figure out how to help the owls.
Thank you so much. That was definitely much more beautifully said than my attempt would have been. I didn't have time to read the first book in the series, so I'm going to go back and read it later because my kids are actually in a reptile conservancy program once a week, which we love. And I was like, turtles, it's like perfect. I'm more of a birder. I read the second one, and I don't think you need to have read the first one. I just wanted to,
great. That's good to hear.
Non-author person, I thought you did a really good job of sort of like giving us the relevant information without, definitely needing to go back. But what prompted you to kind of create this series around Miles as your main character? He's throughout the book, I think, he has the ADHD label. And he also has some other stuff that seems to be going on in certain terms of traits, like, and some other characters too, around, especially like sensory stuff. I notice as an autistic person, I think that's the primary thing I notice is when other characters describe sensory overwhelm or sensory processing challenges. How did you go about like creating all these characters and choosing what to highlight?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did start with Miles. I knew he had ADHD, and I knew I wanted to write a book that was really empowering for an ADHD kid. I'm really interested in how much negative feedback there is on a day-to-day basis for folks with ADHD, right? From corrections to criticisms to teasing and bullying. Like, it's just a whole range of feedback, and that gets so internalized. And I've seen that in family members, and it's heartbreaking. And I wanted to provide a sort of corrective to acknowledge that happens, not to ignore it, but also to give this kiddo some really positive experiences and to let him have success. And maybe success doesn't look like the way he first envisioned it, but I wanted to end on a really high note with not just the first book, but the second, and hopefully the other ones too, that it's a little bit of a roller coaster, but we keep reimagining and we keep finding new ways to succeed and to overcome challenges and negative perceptions. I wanted to write a book too, where people had compassion for this character. And so that readers hopefully have compassion and that we all could use more of that right now in our world, I think. So in coming up with Miles, I had certain traits I wanted him to have, things I had experienced, things I had seen family members experience, but I didn't want it to be any individual person who would recognize themselves. I wanted people to feel seen and represented, but not to be like, hey, that's me. How could you put me in the book? And so I struggled with that, and it actually prevented me from writing it for about a year. And I did have conversations with certain people and just make sure, that people felt okay about how traits are represented. But I also know a lot of people through my work. I was an executive function coach for an academic coaching company. I've taught for many years. I mean, the more I thought about all the people in my life, the more that Miles and other characters became composites and they became more nuanced, right? And not any individual person. And I didn't want to overstuff Miles with like every trait. You could have a long list of things. That is just too much for one character to carry. And he's more than his issues. He's more than his label, obviously. So that required me to come up with more kids, more rangers, more kids on the street. And then when I got to the school setting in book 2, a whole other wealth of possibility. So everybody just became more complicated. And I wanted to have also a range of kids who maybe some have a diagnosis and maybe some do not. Maybe some are early or not yet on that journey. I think that's really important to show.
I appreciate it very much because well, a couple of things you said. The research on how much negative feedback kids with ADHD get over neurotypical kids is wild. I think it's like for every one positive thing they hear 5 negative things, which is really challenging to counter. And also that a lot of as somebody who looks at a lot of children's books with neurodivergent characters in them, a lot of them are still promoting outdated stereotypes, unfortunately, or an external version of ADHD that, those behaviors that you see from the outside. But what I really liked about Miles is that he, first of all, is a very real human child. As somebody who has kids roughly the same age, I have a rising 6th grader. He really felt like a little boy, in a way that a lot of characters in middle grade books do not feel like actual kids. And he felt like a well-rounded, complex human being first. And then these traits kind of, a part of him. I don't want to say secondary, a part of him, but not the main thing, which I really loved and is so hard to find, and made me feel much more kind of confident about handing this book to, a kid I know, right, who's going to see themselves represented and maybe feel some connection to the character.
Yeah.
Without it feeling like pedantic. I think a lot of books in this space feel pedantic. So I just really appreciated that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's great to hear.
Were there specific things that you felt were most important for you to highlight when you're depicting an ADHD child, when you were checking in with other folks and sort of bouncing ideas off? How did you choose which bits to highlight, I guess?
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to do was dispel the myth that people with ADHD cannot pay attention. Mm-hmm. I think that's ridiculous, right? I think it's maybe shifting attention, or it can be hyper attention or hyper focus, and that can be an actual strength. And I wanted to show that. I think Miles is paying close attention to a lot of really important things and in details that might be overlooked. Is that partly his ADHD? Maybe. He's strongly motivated to learn about these turtles, so he's tuned into them. Is it other factors like he's forced to be outside a lot by his parents? He's short and he's close to the ground and he can see these animals. I mean, all kids in the book sort of have that access and they're all paying attention. And so some of it may be that as well. But he's busy and he's getting stuff done, and his parents are sometimes a little hard on him. And, they want him to do his mother wants him to do in book 1, a video program on earth science, and it's like, well, he's outside looking at the turtles. And, in book 2, he does struggle with some of the school assignments some are boring and stupid and some are challenging. And, it kind of depends where his head is on any given day, but he is definitely focused on this owl problem, drawing them in the margins of his math book and turning that into a flip book. Is that a waste of time and distracted behavior? Well, not really, because then he figures out how to manufacture those and sell them and use the money to benefit a wildlife rehabber. So that's not a bad thing, is it? Math is getting done eventually. So, I kind of wanted to show the importance of motivation and how that ties in with focus without being heavy-handed about it. Certainly the sensory issue that you mentioned earlier, I did want to circle back to that because I think the sensory sensitivities can ride along, and the anxiety as well. So I'd say those are part of his profile that were important to get, and that impact how he interacts with nature too.
And why did you decide to place this character in this conservation sort of storyline as opposed to kind of any other setting?
Yeah. So I wanted him to be in a setting where he is, up close and personal with nature. And sometimes that is great. And sometimes it's uncomfortable for him and for other characters. I grew up reading and loving a lot of books about nature. Did you ever read the Jean Craighead George books? She wrote a lot of environmental mysteries, and My Side of the Mountain is kind of...
I don't think so. I was an avid reader as a kid, but I was like Nancy Drew Boxcar Children kind of mysteries. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I love those too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I read Trixie Belden, definitely.
Trixie Belden was good.
Yeah. So yeah, I felt like, something I wanted to explore, having dealt with this myself, was how do you love nature and animals and wildlife, but not always the kind of ickiness that goes along with it. So Miles is someone who doesn't like to squelch through the mud. There are other characters who are bravely going out into the pond, who are getting their hands in the muck of things. And that's maybe not quite his thing. I wanted to show how there are so many different ways that we can engage with nature and by extension, help nature. So for some kids in the book, they're perfectly happy interacting with turtles in a Tupperware container or in a tank in a classroom. Or in the pages of a book or through art. There's a character who is obsessively drawing owls. I think that's a way of interacting with that animal, and it's perfectly fine. There are things that are uncomfortable that all the characters confront in various ways, like heat, rain, bugs, waiting, watching and not seeing anything, listening and not hearing anything. Or on the other end, being just kind of confronted by the sensory overload of being in the woods and maybe lost, and maybe it's getting cold and maybe there's a storm and suddenly it's super uncomfortable. And just to show that range of experience, I guess.
Thanks so much. I really think you kind of got it in the book. I was thinking about, I grew up in a relatively rural area, and it was one of those places where you couldn't get away from nature, right? It was just like constantly there. We had black bears in the yard and tons of just everything. And it was in many ways a really wonderful place for me, because as somebody with sound sensitivities, I have trouble in indoor places where the sound bounces off of walls. And when you're outdoors, there's not that. But it also, as someone who's later identified as an autistic ADHDer, I think the way that nature is so much slower than humans want to be, especially nowadays, it really was stressful for me as a kid to be out there and just like waiting for something to happen, like you were saying. And now I live in a suburb and I have these two kids, and I have these sort of past romantic views maybe of my own childhood, where I remember that I didn't like the mud, and I remember that frogs were slimy, and I remember that sometimes you'd walk out of a pond and there'd be like bugs stuck to you and it was gross. Yeah. But also I remember some of the, great things about being in the woods for hours on end, and wanting to introduce that to my children and support them in a love of earth and nature. And also recognizing they have the same sensory sensitivities, as I do, or similar ones, right? They are sensitive to sun, they're sensitive to heat. They don't always like textures. Wearing the protective kind of clothing you need to wearing the bug spray that has a scent can be really challenging for them. And I really appreciated that aspect of, many of the characters, because it was representative of my experience, even as an adult reading a middle grade book. So it really got at something that I thought was really interesting, and I really appreciated as someone who's also a lover of nature and dealing with the same challenges, or similar challenges anyway. And there are things I hate about the suburb, because we don't have a nature conservance place like right down the road. Though we have mountains if we go a little farther. So that's nice. But it's a challenge to figure out. I don't want to be like Miles's mom, where I'm like, do this thing you hate when you could access the same education in other ways that you would prefer. But I also think it's so important to get kids interested in the natural world. So that was a little side note, but I just really loved what you said and how you did it in the book. It really spoke. Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned that nature was slow, and we can appreciate that slowness. I think that's important. I also, though, and I was certainly with the turtle book was interested in the slowness, and it's summer and it's a really hot summer. But in the Owl Prowl Mystery, it's birds and migration season, and it's ending. And there is a sense of time passing that was sort of different to me. And I also wanted to explore how nature can be fast. You think you hear a bird, you see it, it's gone, you've missed it. And to sort of metaphorically consider how time is like that as for kids as they get into older grades and they're racing through a curriculum and they're, the expectations of what they're doing from hour to hour may be changing. So I wanted to give a little sense of accelerating for this fall themed bird book, because that's kind of his new challenge. My thinking with Miles and his ADHD and some of the other characters is that there's a little bit of a new challenge and a new strength that we learn with each book, so that we're not hitting the same note over and over. So I am really interested in how it feels sometimes like the bar keeps raising, and, we push our kids, we push all of us to keep rushing to the next thing. And there are kids who may want to say, I'm not ready to move on to unit 5. I'm still in unit 4. I'm not ready for middle school. I'm good in 5th grade. I just got good here. I'm not ready for lunch. I just settled into this chair for math, and I'm okay.
Yeah.
And so, thinking about time and nature was really interesting in this book.
Someone should write a paper. I'm thinking about we have a little Discord in our Patreon, and a lot of us, we're all adults in there, but we were talking recently about the autistic experience and sometimes the ADHD experience of time dilation or even time blindness. And I'm one of these people who I don't even know really how to explain my experience, but that time doesn't so much pass, and I don't experience like degradation of friendships or relationships or things the way that neurotypical people seem to. And so even though it's maybe been 2 years since I've seen somebody, to me, I'm still in the same emotional place with them as I was 2 years ago. Like there's no change.
Yeah.
And I also have a very poor memory for like, how old am I? How old are my kids? I think when you asked me before we were recording, and I had to think about it, because I know what years they were born, but what year is it now? And can I do the math real quick? And I have to do that every time anyone asks me an age, because I just don't hold those things. And my experience isn't unique to people, but it's also not, I don't know how common it is. But I know that a lot of the folks in our group have also mentioned experiences with, time can feel so slow when you're in hyperfocus. And then you come back out, it's been 10 hours, but it feels like it's been 5 minutes. So those experiences of time moving faster or slower, there's also something there, I think, about the way neurodivergent experience can mimic or model this experience of fast and slowness in nature that somebody else can say better than me, but I think is like a really cool entry point into thinking about it. So
yeah.
I appreciate you bringing it up. Thanks so much for talking with us today. This has been an amazing conversation. To start to wind up, what do you hope kids who've read this book, or even adults, if you'd like, who've read this book, walk away with after they finish?
The number one thing would be compassion, because I think, just as I'm trying to show in the book how these kids have great compassion for animals, sometimes animals that people don't even see, birds that invisibly fly over us, or turtles that walk around us and are on the side of the road, we don't see them. I hope that people have compassion for folks with learning differences or profiles that may not be immediately obvious, that may have struggles and challenges and strengths that may not be immediately obvious. And I hope that kids have compassion for themselves. Kids who see themselves on these pages, I think self-compassion is super important. Yes. So I am trying to build into the story, especially in Owl Prowl Mystery, moments where Miles can reflect and maybe have guidance along those lines. So the role of caregivers, parents and teachers, and other adult figures in the book is really important, because I'm trying to have them all offer language and opportunities for having conversations that guide children toward more awareness, compassion for others, compassion for self. And, the whole notion of how to help someone, it's complicated, right? Like that's another theme of the book. How do we help people or animals without causing harm? Sometimes that's hard to navigate. How do we help ourselves? When do we self-advocate, or when do we ask for help and say, this is too much, I do need help? How do we sort of make those decisions? There's no easy question and answer like, do you need help? Yes, you should get help. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Help might look different on different days for different folks. So we've got Miles who takes some medication, has a learning plan, has a therapist. All these things are just part of his everyday life. And he sometimes is frustrated because he thinks, I should be cured, I should be fixed, but he's not. Like there's new challenges and life gets more complicated. And so his help for Miles may look different. And then Miles may in turn be in a position to offer someone else help that's really helpful at the right time. And so I guess I want people to have that sense of compassion and an ability to ask whether it feels appropriate to help someone, or ask if somebody needs help, and to think about what that might look like.
Yeah. If you can't have that compassion to start with, then you can't be in the mindset to be curious about other people's experiences and to
Right.
know what might be supportive to them. And so I completely agree with you that teaching kids self-compassion is one of the most important things I think parents can model. And it's hard for
Yeah.
parents to model self-compassion.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Would you mind telling folks where they can find out more about you and where they can buy the book when it comes out in
Absolutely.
August?
Sure. So a good starting point is my website. It's dianarenbooks.com. That's DIANARENN books.com. And there are links from there to my newsletter, which is on Substack. I have a newsletter called Mysteries That Matter. And there's things of interest to mystery writers, nature lovers, kidlit lovers, you name it, dog lovers. I have a tripod dog and I have his ongoing adventures there. I'm on Instagram also as Diana Renn Books. I am slightly on Twitter or X, less so, but I'm kind of there. And the book can be purchased through any bookstore near you. If it's not on the shelf, they can order it happily. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, online vendors, easy to get. And the Owl Prowl Mystery comes out August 13th, and Trouble at Turtle Pond is already out.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'll put those links down below, folks. Please go check out Diana's website. She also, I just will mention, has an amazing set of education guides. How are they? I don't remember exactly what they're called, but PDFs you can download that give you lots of like questions to ask your class and to think through. And it was really cool. I'm going to use them with my kids. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, they can absolutely be used for families too. Or, they spark discussion. They're good for book clubs. Camps does not have to be a traditional classroom. And then there's lots of extension activities, including some fun crafts.
Yeah, there were some really good crafts. As homeschoolers, we're always looking for like, the craft aspect. So I was excited about those. Yeah, they cover a lot of ground. they're really good freebies is what I'm trying to say. So people should go check them out. Yeah. Thanks so much, Diana. I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Beautiful. Okay, so I will stop the.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Neurodiverging podcast today. I hope you found that episode helpful. Please go visit Diana's website at dianarenbooks.com. Renn is RENN. And please go ask your local bookstore for a copy of The Owl Prowl Mystery. I'll also put links in the show notes for you to purchase if you would like. And thank you again to my patrons at patreon.com/neurodiverging for sponsoring this episode and letting us do this work that we do. We are so happy to be able to be funded by you. If you'd like to become a patron and find your community, you can check us out at patreon.com/neurodiverging. Thank you so much for being here today. And please remember, we're all in this together.